Hi and welcome to PolyOriginals with Fiona Abel-Smith. So today I thought we'd have a bit of fun and we'd make ourselves a little hexagon box completely made out of polymer clay. So this is the one we're going to do, which is a nice simple box, plain inside and with a nice pattern on the outside. And we're going to split this down into 3 parts in the video. First part is making a structure to make the box around, and I'll come on to that in a moment or two. Second bit will just be making the plain box, and the third bit will be doing this nice kaleidoscope cane to put around the outside. Now both these boxes have the same colours in the cane. This was the prototype I did and I posted online, and several people actually said, can I keep exactly the same colours? So I have done, which isn't normal for me. Normally I sort of mix the colours about, but I have used exactly the same colours. The cane is very similar, but I've orientated differently to get this one and to get that one. And this one, rather than being plain on the inside, I've just used scrap clay, the ends of canes, and just created a different look. I'll just give you some background behind this. A couple of months ago I posted online a photo of a hexagon box, and someone said, oh, how do you do that? Because I said it was made all completely out of polymer clay. And the answer was that I had used a form, and it was this form. Now, I could not remember exactly where I got this from. I think it was from one of the big craft shows, probably one of the big cake shows, to be honest. But I thought a lot of people aren't going to have a form like this. So there must be a way around making a box without having a form. So I don't know about the rest of you, but I get some of my best ideas when I'm sort of trying to get to sleep at night. And I suddenly thought, well, actually, hexagon's quite easy, because I like hexagons. It's made up of 6 equilateral triangles. So we're going to make our own form. And with this form, we can then make as many of these boxes as we like. So let's start by taking you through the equipment you need for today's project. So to make our hexagon form, we don't actually need very much in the way of equipment. I've got a piece of A4 card here. I'm using white. Now this is quite thickish card. It's actually 300 GSM. So the sort of card you would use if you were making handmade cards, the actual card that would form the base of the card itself. Nice stiff card, but still thin enough to be usable. We need a ruler, a pencil, a pair of scissors, some form of sticky tape, or sellotape as it's called in the UK, and 6 paper clips. And lastly, we just need a sheet of A4 paper, just ordinary sort of copier type paper. And that's what we need to make our hexagon. So the next thing you need to decide is what size you want your hexagon to be. And by size, I'm talking about the height of it and the width of each of your faces of the hexagon. So I'm going to keep mine very much in the shape and size of this. Bear in mind, whatever size you decide on, your finished piece is going to be slightly bigger because the clay is going to go around the outside. And just make a size and a shape that's easy to work with. This happens to be 4 centimetres that way and that way. If you're working in inches, it's about 1.5 inches. So that's the size I'm going to work on today. So on my sheet of A4 card, I have measured out 6 strips. Now each of these is 4 centimetres that way and 4 centimetres that way, and 3 of those, because with each piece we are going to make a little triangle like that. So whatever size you want, you're just going to measure out. So say if you're doing 1.5 inches, it'll be 4.5 inches by 1.5, and centimetres, it's 12 centimetres by 4 centimetres. And you will also need a long strip on the other end of your card, again the same height or width here as you're going for all of these. Again, for me this is 4 centimetres. So cut out all 6 of your pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and cut out your long strip. So with these, I have already done this, where you have your line, just take a pair of scissors or a craft knife and just score down the middle lines, and then you can fold up whichever way you want to go, and then with a little bit of tape simply tape those 2 ends closed, and do that with all 6 pieces. And here are the ones I've done earlier. Make sure to press down that they're nice and flat on the edges, and then when you put them together we have formed ourselves a hexagon. So that's the base of where we're going, but what we need to do is we need to have an outer edge, because we need to be able to slip these in and out as we go in order to be able to get this card in and out of our piece as we're making it. So if you take your paper clips, carefully paper clip your pieces so that they make a nice neat hexagon. And it's just nice to have them held in place like that when we do the next outside layer of card. Take your piece of card that you had to go on the outside. Now, in theory, you'd think, well, we could do the same. Mark down 4 centimetres, 4 centimetres, 4 centimetres, and then score and put round. But of course, we've put this together, so we've got thickness of card here and here. So this piece is actually going to be slightly bigger. And what I would recommend is starting the card on a corner of your hexagon with a pencil, mark down where the next score line needs to be. Then you can carefully score that one, bend it, and start working your way around. So that's the first one. Mark the next one and repeat. So I'm going to speed up now. That's effectively what I'm going to do all the way around, so that this card is going to fit exactly around your hexagon pieces. When you get to the last one, again, mark down where that's going to join up. And this time I'm going to do it with a pencil. Chop off the end. Check still. Use one of those. Check still that it matches absolutely perfectly, and you should hopefully have matched it right nice and tightly onto the end. Then I've got a nice big piece of sellotape there, or sticky tape. In fact, you can take them all out, fold it over, and check that your corners are nicely folded down on your piece. And give it a test. So take the paper clips out, they won't be needed anymore, and start fitting your little triangles inside your card piece. The last one you will normally have to squash in slightly, but it should fit in, and that gives you a really nice sturdy base that we can use for making our boxes with. And this is one I've made previously and I've been using, and I've now made 4 boxes using the same template, so you can use it again and again and again. And because we've got this method and use this card, the next thing we need to do is we are going to take our sheet of A4 paper, and we are going to cut ourselves a strip just wider than the box. Not a lot, probably if on a 4 centimetre piece, probably 4.5 centimetres wide. And as before, we're going to take this and we want to fold it around. Now this time you can do the first fold so it's overlapping a place slightly, and just find where the fold should be with your fingers. Doing. Okay, so where it overlaps, just chop a little excess off. And with another piece of tape, just tape this around the outside to make it nice and tight around your hexagon. So there we go. So you've got your 6 little triangles on the inside, you've got your card sleeve around the outside, giving more strength, and then you've got a simple paper collar around the outside of that as well. And it's the collar that will be right next to the clay, and then we can just take this out so there won't be any problem with the clay sticking to the card, and you can reuse this again and again and again. And if you were using something like this, a metal one, I would again suggest putting a paper collar all the way around this, again slightly higher than the piece you're working on, just to make the clay easier to remove and pull off any metal form when you're using it. having finished our form here that we're going to make our box round, the other equipment we need to do when working with the clay is a tile. We're going to use this to put our piece on and obviously to bake on as well. Some liquid clay or PVA glue, and this is just liquid clay that I've decanted into a little pot just for ease of use for myself. A tissue blade or a clay blade, however you want to call it, a craft knife, a small roller to be able to roll our piece smooth, a knitting needle of some description. This is a 4mm knitting needle just with a stub ended, and it's quite a short one. I just use it for rolling over seams. These sort of tools are quite handy. These are the cane benders, cane shapers. I'll put the links to those at the bottom in the details of the video if you haven't got those. You don't need them, but they are handy if you happen to have them. I'm going to constantly, when I bake my pieces, tent the whole piece in foil, so having some foil to hand is good. You will need a ruler. A metal one is very handy because we're going to use it and cut along the sides of it, so you need something you're going to be able to use and cut alongside. And you're going to use some form of measuring sheet. Now I'm actually going to use both this board, which happens to be in centimetres, and this measuring sheet, which happens to be in inches. This one is freely downloadable from www.printablepaper.net, and I'll put a link to where this board came from in the details below the video as well. A piece of board or something, it doesn't need to be this, just something flat. We're going to use this to push up against the sides of our hexagon to make sure it's nice and flat. And other tools, you will obviously need a pasta machine, some wet wipes. We're going to need a lot of wet wipes and just some tissues so that when you've used your wet wipes you can dry off your equipment. So the next thing to do is we're going to make the actual base of our box. And to do this we're going to need about 3 packs of clay. So it's about 6 ounces and about 170 grams of clay. Any colours will do. You can use scrap clay. For today I've taken 1.5 packs of the Windsor Blue and 1.5 packs worth of scrap clay, mixed all my scrap clay together to make a grey sort of colour, and then mixed in the blue. So what I've ended up with is a nice sort of dusky dark blue colour. And I've just put this through on my pasta machine. I'll just put it through again one more time, and I've put it through, this is the whole 3 packs, 6 ounces of clay, and I've put it through on my thickest setting of the pasta machine. And on my pasta machine, 0 is my thickest and 9 is my thinnest. So I'm going to put it through one more time just to get myself a nice long thick sheet. Now if you're working in inches, then you can use one of these measuring sheets, and you'll want to cut a strip that's 1.5 inches wide, and really the whole length of this, because we know from the fact that we covered this with a sheet of A4 paper that a whole length of an A4 sheet of paper is just about going to be the right amount to go around it. But because I'm doing mine in centimetres, I'm just going to take my ruler and chop off either end nice and neat. So with a metal ruler, and then just the corner edge of my tissue blade, chop it off, leave it lying flat, go to this end, just check with a sheet of A4 paper whether this is going to be long enough, so I need to go right to the end. So I'll go to the end of my board, which is actually about here. And then I can take my ruler and, using the grid lines on this board, or if you're using this, then use the grid lines on this, just chop yourself off the piece nice and neatly, the right size. So 1, 2, 3, 4 centimetres. And the rest we're obviously going to use for the bottom and top in a moment or two, but we're just doing the side to start with. So we now have a nice strip of clay that should hopefully fit around our box. So just put it round once just to check that it will go, which it does. So what we now need to do is make sure our paper is nicely at the bottom of our pieces. And I'm going to start just on one corner. So I'm going to fold over a little bit of the corner, and I'll come back to that afterwards. And what I'm doing is I'm pressing it down as I go, making sure it's lying nice and flat onto the tile. As I get to a corner, so I'm going to press down, work your way down, round, pressing in as you go, keeping it nice and tight in. Right down to the last one. And then when we get the overlap, we want to do a nice chamfered join. So I'm going to take my first bit where I've joined, and I'm going to cut down at an angle, going straight down along that corner, so that when this one fits in along, it'll fit nicely around. So I now know I can chop down like that to keep the angle nice as it goes down the corner. I'm just going to take my knitting needle and give it a bit of a roll just to make sure those two seams, or the two parts of the seam, are joined. And at this stage I'm going to just pick it up and put it down onto the tile that I'm going to bake it on. And now I'll just spend a bit of time making sure that those sides are nice and flat in, that each of the corners has got a nice angle on it. I will also take this little piece of hardboard and just press up to really make sure those sides are nice and straight. And this helps both with the angles at the corner and with the sides being straight. Do it the whole way around. And have a look, make sure that it's nicely sat flat down on the tile all the way around, because we want a really nice flat bottom. You shouldn't have had to touch the top too much, so the top should be nice and even too. When you're happy that you've got all those sides are straight and you've got a nice little corner around all your sides, then simply bake it in the oven according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay you are using. Okay, when your piece is finished baking, what we need to do is we need to move all these bits slightly. So they may move quite easily, but the likelihood is that the paper will be stuck in some respects to the clay. So what we need to do, we need to put a bottom on this, and we need to move all this paper just slightly out of the way so that when we press this down into the bottom clay, the paper doesn't get stuck. So the easy way to do this is to pull out all your triangles, then pull out the card, and as before, buckle it slightly on one side, and then just make sure the paper lifts away. If it does, just pull it up so that it's not at the bottom of your piece, and ideally, probably about a 1/4 inch, 1/2 centimetre high. Then we can put the card back in. Again, make sure it's nicely pulled up from the bottom, and then you can start slotting in your triangles. Once they're all in, just pull them up the same. And just have a look at the bottom. So that's what you need to have, a nice bit of clear clay so that when we press this down into a bottom layer, it's not going to stick, but you've still got all the pieces in place, so they're still supporting these side walls when it bakes. So make sure your tile is nice and clean. I've put through the remaining part of the clay, or part of it, again through the thickest setting on my pasta machine, so setting number 0 on mine, and I'm just going to lie that nice and flat on the tile. Make sure there's no air trapped underneath whatsoever. Then take some liquid clay or PVA glue, a little bit on your finger, not too much, and just put a bit all the way around the bottom edge of your hexagon and the side walls. So you don't want enough to make it slippy, just enough to make it slightly tacky or sticky, and this will just help this sit in really nicely to the bottom clay. Then place it squarely on your tile, and what we're going to do is we're just going to press down, not much, but just a little bit on these side walls. Work your way around one at a time, just so that it's nicely held in, and then either with tissue blade or with a craft knife. And a craft knife is probably slightly easier because it's not you'll find that some of your sides, like mine, aren't completely straight. So what I'm going to do, starting from an outside edge, and then keeping my blade nice and flat and straight up to the side of the hexagon, just work your way around, turning the tile as you go. And then have a look back. So I can see here, for instance, it's not quite neat here. There's a couple of places. So take your time, have a look around, make sure it's completely neat all the way down the sides. Once you're happy, as we did before, you can take a piece of hardboard or something like that and just press it in to make sure you've got nice flat bits at the bottom. Run the edge of your blade down, whatever you want, just to make sure it's nice and smooth and even when it goes in the oven to bake. Okay, so there it is, ready to bake. Leave it in situ on the tile so it's nicely pressed down, and bake again as before. I will tent the whole thing in foil, or bake yours according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay you are using. So once your piece has finished baking and is nice and cool, remove it from the tile and make sure your tile is nice and clean. And now you can take all these bits out of your box base. Because that is now finished with, and our box base is finished. So with your nice clean dry tile, get the rest of your polymer clay and put it back through again that same settings of your pasta machine, and again lay it flat on your nice clean tile. Take your box and turn it upside down. Now with a little something to give you a marker, and this is where I use something like the knitting needle, I'm just going to lay it flat along one side of the box, and that gives me something to press down along so that I know when I'm chopping this clay off, I'm chopping it off the same size around each side of the box. You just repeat and go around all 6 sides of the box with the knitting needle cutting off flat. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to press just lightly down, so I'm going to give myself an impression in the bottom of the lid so that when I pick up I can see where that's going to sit. If you can see there the impression that's marked in. Put that to one side just for a second. Get the remaining piece of your A4 paper, put your box down and just mark yourself a template the size of your box on the piece of paper. Because what we're going to do is we're going to make something that's going to fit inside the box lid. So I now know that this needs to be about that much smaller, so that this piece will sit inside this marked area and be a little raised area, so that when the lid sits on the box it will just hold it in place. So cut round this on the inside line, and in a piece of clay you've got left over, so the same thickness as we've been working on the whole way through. Cut round your template. And now with a little bit of liquid clay or PVA glue, just a smidge, just enough to make it slightly tacky on that middle bit. I'm just going to put a little bit of clay just on the middle bit, and this will allow me to move that top bit around a bit as well. So now take this and place it as centrally as you can, looking all the time at that line you've got on the inside of your box. If it's too big, pull it back slightly and make sure it's always in line or always inside that line you've got from the lid of from the bottom of the box. I'm just going to round those corners off slightly because the corners of my box are rounded. And I'm just going to put this over the top just to see that it fits, which it does, that's fine. So now that's all done, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to very gently round all of these corners, because the corners on my box are round, so I want the corners of the lid to be round as well. So just using the blunt side of the tissue blade. And last but not least, where I've made a slight groove with the tissue blade, I'm just going to, with my knitting needle, just smooth that all off, so that when it bakes, it's all nice and the underneath of the lid is as pristine as I can get it. So as before, once you finish that, tent the whole piece in foil and bake according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay you're using. So once your piece is finished baking, remove it from the tile and then just check that it fits on your box. And hopefully it should fit no matter which way around you put it. So that's your box now finished ready. So now we'll start decorating it. So for today's session, these are the colours of clay we're going to be using. We're actually using quite a lot of clay here. There's 4 whole packs in effect. So 2 ounces of these and then 1 ounce of these 4 colours. So that's 56 grams of these, 28 grams of those. And today I'm using Fimo Soft, but all brands of polymer clay will work well for this technique. And I am using white, lemon yellow, emerald green, raspberry, Pacific blue, and then the Windsor blue. Although I've used the Windsor blue here, I have so much of this leftover blue from when I made up my box that is effectively the same as a block's worth. So I'm going to use this colour rather than this one in what I'm doing. Now I'd recommend you splitting them up into these sort of sizes and conditioning them in those particular sizes. For anyone who doesn't understand what I mean by conditioning polymer clay, I do have a free YouTube video showing you how to do that with some tips and techniques, and I'll put a link in the description of the video below so you can have a look at that. The reason we're doing it this way is because this is going to be used to wrap round our canes. These are going to be used as extra bits to put inside our canes, and all these little bits are going to be used to make up Skinner blends. So we're going to do, for instance, that is a Skinner blend, that is a Skinner blend, and then that is a Skinner blend. So that's what I'm going to do first. Having conditioned all the clay, I'm going to make up the Skinner blends for all of those. Is by having sort of very rough, and you can see they are very rough, oblong shapes. So I'm going to chop the 2 end ones across the middle diagonally, turn them round, put the 2 pieces on top of each other, and then this one I'm going to chop down the middle so that we've got 2 layers of everything. This one then sits inside that one goes that way up, so that what we end up with is a rough oblong where I've got all of one colour on one side and it goes more and more and more mixed until it ends up with all the other colour on the other side. And with these ends, just sort of push them in. Don't want to fold, but you can just make it slightly neater if you want to. Now I put these through on setting 3 of the pasta machine, where my pasta machine 0 is thick and 9 is thin. And because we've now got 2 layers of each of those colours, I will put the pasta machine up to setting number 2. I'm going to fold these over so that they don't fall apart first time I put them through the pasta machine. And I'm going to put it through, fold first, and keep repeating that, fold bottom to top and putting through, fold first, until I get a nice smooth blend. For anyone not sure how to do a Skinner blend, I do have a YouTube tutorial on that, and in that I also give you tips and techniques for how to keep it nice and oblong shaped, as you'll see my piece will be when we're finished. So I'll do this one first and bring you back when that's done. So there we go, that's our first one done, so I'll put that onto one side. Okay, there's our 4 blends. So we'll start just working with one, and we'll get all 4 into a certain state before we start making more patterns with them. So I'll start with this one to begin with. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to chop it in 2 and lay one half on the other. And the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want to work in height of more than about 1.5 inches, sort of 3.5 centimetres, something like that. So I'm going to put this back through the pasta machine on the same setting I was using, so setting number 2. I'll put through the darker end first to make sure that if it picks up any mess, it's not going to go onto the lighter end. And I put this end through I'll just pinch those two ends together slightly, and I will hold on to these two ends to make sure they don't separate into a Y. Don't worry about what happens at this end, just concentrate on holding on these two ends. So we've got a nice longer strip. I'm now going to put this through, and what I want is a very nice long thin strip of clay. So it's always going to go through the pasta machine that way down. Again, for those of you who watched videos before, you know what's coming, but here we go. If you know that your pasta machine is a good one, go straight down to your thinnest usable setting. If, however, you know your pasta machine, choose up your clay, work down one setting at a time, going thinner and thinner until you get to your lowest, thinnest setting, or your thinnest usable setting. So I'm going to put this straight through on setting number 9 on mine, which is my lowest setting, and I'm going to put it through the pink end first, which is the darker end. I'm not going to worry what happens this end, but I'm going to keep hold of and keep controlling this end. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the pasta machine handle just a couple of times once I put it down on the lower setting, just to make sure that any clay stuck on the underneath doesn't go onto the end of my clay. So here we have a nice long thin strip of clay. Now this first one I'm going to concertina backwards and forwards till I end up with a square of clay, and I'm concertinaing it probably about just over 1 centimetre, so just over 1/4 of an inch, or about 1/3 of an inch in width, backwards and forwards, just folding it as I go, trying to make sure I don't have any air trapped in the folds. Not worrying too much about any bits at the side that are straggly, because I'm about to change it in a second, so that'll be fine. When you've got to the end, you'll find it quite often goes a bit skew-if, so just straighten it up, flatten the two ends off so you've got a usable piece to work with, and you'll end up with a sort of a square or oblong shape. The ends always look messy, don't worry about it, but in between you'll have a nice graduation from the pink all the way through to the yellow. And I'm then going to do exactly the same with this one. Then we'll move on to our pink and blue, same again, chop in two, put back through the pasta machine, setting number 2, blue end first, then back through my thinnest usable setting, which is setting number 9, again blue end first, having turned the handle a couple of times. So we get our nice long strip of clay, but this time we're going to roll the clay. Now I'm choosing to roll from the pink end, you can use whichever end you like, and just roll up, making sure not to trap any air in the roll as you go. And don't forget you can change the size of this roll to pick up any bits, or to change it if you need to change it because the size of your strip of clay has changed. I'm going slightly smaller there, and then slightly wider. Okay, so there's our roll. And then finally I'm going to do the same with the green one. With this one, we did effectively the lighter colour on the inside and rolled to the darker colour. This one we're going to do the darker colour on the inside and roll to the lighter colour. So there are our 4 Skinner blends done, 2 concertinaed into squares and 2 rolled into plugs of clay. And now we're going to have some fun and change them and make some pretty patterns out of them. So I'll start with this one. So this is where they've got the pink on the inside and the blue on the outside, and I've put some of my dark blue through a medium setting on my pasta machine, so setting number 5, and I've got just enough that when I put that down here we can cut a sheet to go completely around the outside of our roll. So I'm going to use my tissue blade, cut down and flick off, top and bottom, neaten up one end, and then wrap round to give just one roll round. If I press down there, I can see where it overlaps, to give myself a place to cut off. Put over any gaps. Give it a bit of a roll, just to neaten it down. And now I want to cut through this into nice even quarters if I can. So looking over the top, if you need to, just seesaw your blade as it goes down, because it gives you more control and you can actually look either side to see where it's going. and the same the other way. If at any time you find you cut your quarters really badly, then don't be scared of just putting the whole thing back together, placing it all back together, give it another roll, push it back together, and then have another try at cutting, because that works very well as well. But what we're going to do for now, we're actually going to put these together so that one sits upside down over the next one. Okay? So whichever way you hold it, you've got one piece of the colour showing up and two bits of the dark. And put it down on one of the sides, doesn't matter which, and we're going to force this down into a triangular shape. So we'll have a bit of the black at the top, and by forcing it down into a triangular shape, all I'm doing is pressing on the two bits down the side, and then with my fingers pinching the top into a point. And I'm trying to make sure it's nice and even along the width. I can turn it upside down, press the ends sharp in. And I'm going to be looking for a piece. I'm going to make my cane about my cane's about 1.5 inches in length. So I can pick this up. So I'm going to put the two bits together. So I want this, roughly speaking, just under 3 inches. So there we go, on my measuring sheet. Chop down the middle and put the two patterns together. So I'm going to put them together that way. So you've got like the zigzag colour running through. Put them together like that, and then I'm just going to force that into more of a rounded diamond shape, just by pressing in on the sides. And there we go. Check on the height of it. So I'm just going to put it slightly longer, because I want it to be about 1.5 inches. I'm going to make all of my canes the same height, and that's cane number 1 done. Cane number 2, we're going to take our second roll, and again I'm going to cover it in a layer of the darker blue clay. Same thing again, so it's gone through on setting number 5 on my pasta machine. I'm using the blade to cut top and bottom, pick it up and put one layer round. Exactly the same again. I'm going to chop down into nice even quarters if I can. So same thing, seesawing backwards and forwards. But this time I'm going to put 1/2 on one side and only cut down on one side. Put that one like that and put these two in front of it. And what you get left with is a nice little triangular groove there. So take some of your excess pink clay that we've already conditioned, and I'm going to create a triangular shape that will fit inside there. Try and make sure it's the same the whole length down, so I'm just pulling it slightly. Chop off the excess. And because we've got quite a large expanse of pink there, I'm going to take my knitting needle and I'm going to create a groove down the middle of the pink. You see there, just made a groove. Take some of your white, roll a very thin sausage, again try and keep it even. Whenever we're doing a kaleidoscope, we try and keep it even from one end down to the other, and then we'll just put that down. If you find it slightly goes thinner at a point, don't forget you can always pull it or push it slightly wider. And we've already more or less got a triangular shape. We're just going to reinforce that by pressing down on the bottom and again creating a pinch at the top. And what I'm going to do, as we did before, I'm going to make it getting on towards 3 inches in length. And that's 7.5 centimetres. Chop down. Now of course I could put it together like that and that create a nice cane, but for this is what we're doing at the moment, I'm just going to put it together like that. Put it together both sides, and then I'm just going to change this because I want this bit to be the bottom point. When you're doing a kaleidoscope, it's nice not to have some thick amounts of a single colour down the side of your end cane where you put everything together. So because of that, I'm just going to change this slightly. So I'm going to pull down and actually push it down in the other direction. And because I already had it in a triangle, and I've now pushed that bit back, that's creating more curves in our piece. So what I'm going to end up with, and I'll cut off one end in a minute just to show you. So if I chop the end off, we've got that sort of effect. So that's one end. Don't really need to chop the other end off, but just so I can see what we're doing. That one there. And then I'm just going to shorten that by just simply pressing it smaller with my fingers to make it the same height as our first piece. So that's our first two pieces done. For our next piece, I'm going to take this one, and I've also taken the remainder of the blue that we had, and I've put this through on a thick medium setting, so setting number 3 on my pasta machine. And I'm going to take a piece that is just going to cover 2 sides of this square cane. So find one corner and then wrap round the next, chop down. So I've only covered 2 parts of it. Then in one of the sides, I'm going to choose this one where the colours are joined. Take your knitting needle, press a groove into one side and take a little bit of your excess blue that you've just chopped off. And put that in there, so you've got a piece like that. We're now going to make this bit into a point of a triangle. And as you know, when we're pressing down things down into triangles, we're simply going to flatten the piece down at the bottom. So put the bit that you want to go flat on the bottom, and then simply press the other 2 bits down with your fingers. And what you then end up with is a triangle. And now we've got that point on the bottom. So what I'm going to do, as before, I'm just going to pull that slightly longer. And when it gets up towards 3 inches, 7.5 centimetres, making sure, as always, that this end is the same width as that end, chop down roughly through the middle, and put your 2 bits together. And I'm going to put them together so that the blue line is together in the middle and the excess of the clay is on the outside. Press it down again, and then we're going to do the same again, so make it longer, and we're going to double up the pattern. Press in again, down the sides, pull it longer. Every so often, press on the ends to make sure that they're nice and flat and you've got no distortion. And when it's getting up to about the right length, simply chop in half. And again, simply put those 2 bits together. And as we did before, it's this bit we want on the outside of the kaleidoscope, not this bit. So press down so that bit's flat. And there's our cane number 3. Check that it's roughly the right height for the other 2. And there's 3 of the canes, so let's work on the last one. For this last one, choose a side. I'm actually going to choose a side where the colours are joining. So you've got that nice blend. And with your roller, just press down. Give yourself a nice groove in the middle. Take another colour. And at this moment, I'm going to choose yellow. I'm going to make this roll slightly smaller than I need to fill the groove, because I'm then going to roll down it to try and make it fill out the whole of that groove. So I've now got a flat piece in there. Try and make sure it's the same the whole way along. Give yourself another little groove. Let's go off centre. So we'll go up towards that end. Take another colour. So let's get a bit of our pink. I'm just going to take a small bit, make a size to fit in that groove. And there we have a square cane. So I'm just going to make that longer. Make sure the ends are nice and flat, and then I'm going to chop that in two. So I'll just put it over the measuring sheet so that the middle is down there. And then we're going to put it together, but offset it. So we're going to create a triangle space there and a triangular space there, and then we're going to fill those with different colours. So we've got a bit of pink going on here, so we'll do some with the pink here. So I'm just taking again a bit of that excess pink and just forcing it down into a triangular shape. It doesn't want to be too long because I haven't got too long an area there, but you want to make sure that whatever shape you add in is nice and even, so that one end of the cane is going to be the same as the other. So we'll just pop him in there, and then I'm going to pull with my fingers slightly wider till he starts to fit in that gap. Chop off any excess. So that's one side done. And then this side, just got a little bit left, so I think this time we'll put a little white in. And the last thing I'm going to do with these is I'm going to take a little bit of the dark colour, and in both of these I'm just going to create another little channel. So he's a bit short at the moment, so let's change. We've got sort of a diamondy square going on at the moment, so let's just change that into even more of a diamond. So what I did there was I used my fingers to push him into the shape, and we'll do it so that that blue is on the corner there. And that blue is on the corner there, and I'm just going to pull those up to make sure I've got the same amount of clay and my stripes are as neat as I can get them. So we've gone slightly longer than we need to, so I will just chop off that end so we can see what we've got. So it's a bit of a mishmash, but then that often works out really well in kaleidoscopes. You never know quite what sort of effect you're going to get because we've got that Skinner blend in there. It'll create all sorts of wonderful, interesting effects. Okay, so we've got our canes, and I've also conditioned and just rolled into logs all our extra bits of colour. And now it's just a case of putting these together in a triangular format. So I think I'll put that as one corner of our triangle. I think this will be a corner, and possibly something along those sort of lines, and we'll need to fill something in there. So the next thing I need to think about is the orientation of these pieces and whether I want to put them together like that, whether I need extra colour. Now I think I need quite a bit of extra white to go in here just to make it ping and give some nice brightness. So you don't just have to put the colours in as logs or as triangles. You can also put some in as flat sheets. So I'm going to roll this flat, put it through pasta machine on a medium setting. It's probably setting number 3 on mine. And this has already got a nice bit of white in it, so I'm going to take my tissue blade and just cut the white into a bit of a strip. I think we've already got white there. Let's just take the white from there and put him round a couple of sides, perhaps not all the way around, maybe around to there. Take it down a bit more, make sure it's the same all the way down. And then let's perhaps take a roll, because it's nice wherever your colours end that they end in either a round rather than a straight point. So let's just make a little log of that and press in here to put a groove so the white's going to join up. So that can be one thing we can do. So we said that was going to go on a corner. So maybe let's have him somewhere like that, going down one side. And perhaps if we put him there, so that's not leaving us too much, but we're going to have gaps in here, we're going to have gaps in here. So for the gap in here, let's take a bit of the yellow. And that's quite a triangular shape in there. So I'm going to take a lump of this and put it into a triangle. And I'm just pressing it down, trying to keep the shape relatively even. And I'm making it longer because both the ends tend to become distorted. So it's easier to make a piece that's going to fit in. So it's going to fit in along the side here. But then chop off the ends that are smaller. So let's see how he's going to go. He's not far off, but we've got a lot of blank colour here. We've got a lot of blank colour along this end here of these two. So I'm going to take an alternate colour. Actually, let's take a little bit of the dark, because it's sometimes nice to have a big lump of the dark too. And let's create, so with one of these square benders or shapers, I'll put the links to these below the video. We've just created another groove. So we can take a bit of this and create a triangular shape, and we know we're going to have a nice angled groove to fit it in. Same as before, I'm going to make it slightly longer than I need it to make sure it's nice and even all the way down, and that should fit in there. And as before, just pull it over with your thumbs till it fits down the outside. Chop off any excess, top and bottom. So let's see how we're doing now. Yep, that's looking better. We still need a little bit in here, and I still want to take away the fact that that's all dark there. And that's all we're doing when we're doing a kaleidoscope. We're just creating things to fill up the gap and create an interesting pattern where you haven't got all of one colour in any particular place. So that's going to squish down into there, which is fine. So this needs to be our other corner. So we do need to make something else here. So one quick way of making a cane is very similar to the snowflake cane. That was one of my earlier videos. So let's do a little something like that. If we take the blue and the green, I'm just chopping these up here because I'm going to put them back through the pasta machine. I had more of the green than the other two colours, so I put that on a thick setting, setting number 2. The blue's on number 3, so I'm going to put this back through on a thinner setting, so something like number 5. And I'm just going to create a sandwich of these colours. And having done that, chop down through. I just want a little square really. Immediately separate your colours, because you might be using them elsewhere. Have a look on the back. So it needs to be like that and that. And yes, that gives us all 3 colours all the way around. And then I'm just going to get a little bit more of the white, roll that into a long thin sausage. And pinching one end of this, we're just going to roll this around the white. You see this rolled round? Take another little bit of the white. And all I'm looking for is to make something that's going to fit in to that gap. So this bit of white can go this side. And let's pull him back round. I've made a sort of S shape in there. And I'm just going to force this into a triangle. Again, pressing down, pulling up at the top. Put those 2 bits together and we've created a brand new cane, and I'm just going to change the shape of it until it fits in there. So I'm pulling it longer because this is quite a point it goes to. And this one will probably end up bigger than I need, but that's fine. So I'll just chop off the excess. And this is the thing I love about kaleidoscopes. Each one will be slightly different because you'll have gaps in different places every time you do one. So I'm just going to take off the excess there. And then we have a very rough triangular shape. Now you see it's not at all like an equilateral triangle, and I've done that on purpose to show that it doesn't need to be an equilateral triangle. If you want to do it equilateral when you first started, that's fantastic, but I quite like making them these odd triangular shapes, because that means that when you move them and force them into more of a regular triangle, you're going to change the proportions of things, and some things are going to become more prominent and some things are going to slip into the background. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look down my sides, and wherever I've got a large expanse of the same colour, I'm just going to take a knitting needle or one of the cane benders, depending on what size you want to do, and just add a little insert. So there we go, that's our cane done. And now we need to start reducing the cane. Okay, so my hands are clean, and before I even start reducing this, the next thing I need to do is have a look at my box. So, whatever size your box is, you now need to measure it, and I'm going to see if I can, because I've got an inch working sheet, if I can work out a good height in inches. So, don't know if you can see there, but it is effectively now 1 3/4 inches in height, and it's also, well, if I turn it on its side, slightly longer, but nearly 2 inches in width across all of these. But the great thing about doing a hexagon shaped box is we can layer up the triangles along the side, and as long as your triangle fits down there, which will be between 1 3/4 and 2 inches for me, then I know it's going to fit around the whole of the box and the lid as well, which will be perfect. So measure that before you start reducing, because I now know I need to stop as soon as I get close to it being 2 inches on either side, because you don't want to get carried away. Okay, so I'm going to start with my biggest side on the ground, and I'm going to press that down to a nice flat side, and I'm going to press in. This side is shorter than this side, so with my thumbs I'm actually pulling up the back side until this is going to be my point. On this side, this line here is going to be my point. So all I'm doing is pressing in and making those points even more obvious. And on this side, this is going to be my point. Every so often I will turn it on its end and force up any of the sides if they've gone shorter than the middle, and then start working in and just pressing in, and as I'm pressing in, so I'm pulling it slightly longer. The thing I would say about reducing canes like this, particularly when this is a big cane, don't rush it. Now I have reduced a lot of canes, so I'm working probably more quickly than most of you will when you're first starting. It isn't a race. It's more important to get it exact and to be quick. So it's starting to go in on the bottom, so again I'm turning it on its bottom, pressing it down flat, pulling these sides up. Now again, if any of you have got the products that you put on the ends of these to stop your cane reducing or distorting so much, do use them. They are fantastic, and I will put the links to them at the end or in the description under the video. But for those of you who haven't, I'm just going to reduce it without them. So now I've got to a stage where I'm sort of fairly manageable. I'm starting to press in as I go, just on the bottom, which is reinforcing the triangular shape. I'm also trying to make sure that these points are equal distance over the bottom side, because that helps you make a nice equilateral triangle. So I'm just going to check now, see where I am. So about 2.5 inches, just over 2 inches, just over. So we're not far off. So from this point on, I think I will work on the measuring sheet because I don't want to go too far and too small. Just keep pressing in. And when I'm starting to get close, I'm going to put my bottom edge against one of these dark lines on the sheet so that I can see where I'm pressing and what size my cane has become. And all the time I'm trying to keep it even along the length. It's quite handy every so often to rotate it the other direction so that if you find your fingers are working harder at the start than at the end, that stops any distortion as well. And we're pretty close. So I will stop talking and I will carry on doing this until I'm at the right size. Okay, so I have now got my piece to where it's basically 2 inches the whole way around. Now I think this is still too big, but I know on the end I'm going to have wastage where the pattern's not going to be exact. So I'm going to cut a strip off and then just put it up to my box to see. And in actual fact, that's just about perfect. So I am going to stop there, and it is going to be 2 inches, so I'm glad I stopped when I did. So I would always suggest that if you're not sure, stop a bit beforehand and then take it off and have a look. So what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to do something which looks slightly weird, but I'm going to cut straight down the middle, in part because I want to see what we've got, to check that it's going to give me a nice pattern and that I'm happy with it. So you can start having a look through, but also because I know there's going to be no distortion in the middle. This will be the pattern we've got. Also gives me a chance to see which way around I'm going to want to orientate the pattern. Quite like it with that. So yes, it just gives me a chance to have a look through. But I now know that is the distorted end, that is the pristine end. So if I now put this up like that, I know I can start taking slices from this one. So the next thing I want to do is going to put a little bit of liquid clay or PVA glue around the outside of this. If you're going to use PVA glue, put it on and then leave it till the glue is actually dried, because you don't need it to be that tacky. With the liquid clay you need such a small amount, so I want enough to make it tacky, not slippy, because I don't want these sheets to slide off once I put them on. So a little bit of liquid clay, and so this one I've just decanted, and I'm just going to put a tiny daub on each of my sides, so you can see there how small an amount I've put on. Right, now for the fun bit. Now we are going to need to cut 12 slices from this piece, because we need 12 to go around our box. So as I've said before in videos, it doesn't matter how thick or thin you make them, the important thing is to be consistent. So do what feels comfortable for you. If you've got one of the slicing machines, fantastic, you can make this really thin if you want to. I like making them quite chunky, so I'll probably do mine, let me have a look, see. Probably about that sort of thickness. Because you're cutting from the top, and if you look over the top, you can see on both sides where your blade is at any given time. So don't rush, just slowly press down till you get a nice slice. And then repeat. And I would recommend doing something like about 4 to start with. Again, this is just a way of checking to make sure that your cane is going to fit. And then just start putting them on. So the first one goes at the bottom and towards the top, and you can see there how I just pulled that. Now I can see here where I've actually pressed in down the sides, so I'm going to have quite a big gap in the middle here when I put these pieces on, but that is fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put those 2 pieces on and put this next piece on. So make sure you orientate it the right way around. And I would always recommend putting two of the flat pieces on where they're flat to the bottom and one in between, and then work on putting those pieces together. So you can see I'm actually picking them up, going to manoeuvre them till I get a really good match. I'm not worried about the gaps in the middle here at the moment. I'm just looking for the matches for all those colours, all those spots, and that's why we made all those inserts, because when you put these together, it then makes it easy to match them up. So now we've got them more or less put together, I'm just going to roll with my knitting needle, and I'm rolling just with this bit here, and I'm just going to persuade these towards each other. Okay, I'm going to do the same here at the bottom because this one isn't flat on the bottom. You can do it with a needle. You can actually move it up slightly with your fingers, persuade it up. And what we're looking for is a piece that's nice and flat at the top and nice and flat at the bottom. I wouldn't recommend rolling until we've got the final piece on each of the faces. So let's put this piece on here. And now, as soon as I've got one face completely flat, now I can take my roller and start rolling backwards and forwards to make sure I've got a really nice, smooth piece. You can roll at the bottom and you can roll on the top to make sure that's gone all the way up. It's easier to make it go over the top and then shave off a bit as you go than it is to have it less. So I'm going to carry on. I'm going to finish completing the pattern all the way around the outside of the box, and I will bring you back when I've done that. Okay, so I've covered the whole of the outside with the cane. Having covered it all, I've then given it a really good roll that way, across all the corners, and made sure I've got as much of fingerprints and other marks out as I can get, because I want to spend as little time sanding as possible. And in doing that, I have on purpose gone fractionally over, both at the top and at the bottom. So what we should be able to do now is, with our tissue blade, just go down and very carefully shave off . Okay, we are going to add a little bit extra on both the top and the bottom afterwards. So if you're doing it the inside, use only the edge of your knife, keeping it very well away from your fingers, and then just go along the top. So when you've done that and gone around all 6 sides and your piece is as neat as you can make it, set it on your tile. As always, tent the whole thing in foil and bake according to the manufacturer's baking instructions for the brand of clay you are using. Okay, let's move on to the lid. Now, using your little bit that you cut off beforehand, you should find that that will leave you with quite a bit of a gap at the outside, and that's fine because we're going to put a nice border around the outside, just a plain one, but a nice border around the outside of this piece. So using the new bit of the half of the clay that I hadn't used beforehand, I've taken myself off 6 even slices, and I'm just going to spend a little bit of time looking at the 3 different pattern ways we've got to decide which way I want to put it up. So I could put it together like that, I could put it together like that, or I could put it together like that, and I think this is the one I'm going to go for. I quite like the fact it's got a nice hexagon in the middle. So having decided, I'm going to take 2 of my pieces and put them together so that they match nicely, and then put my 3rd piece together. You can do this down on the sheet, you don't have to do it up in the air, but once you've got all 3 pieces down, check with the blunt side of your tissue blade that they are meeting nicely in the middle, and then I'm going to put these 2 pieces together, I'm going to add those 2 onto here, and then carefully add the last piece in. strange noises in the background, that is my dog chuntering and making all sorts of weird noises. It's not me. So, put it together, more or less got it matched, as we did before with the knitting needle. Just persuade any gaps to close. And what I'm looking on doing is to get it as pristine as I can on the sheet here, and then I'm going to lift it off in one whole piece and lay it on my lid. Once I've got all those seams joined, I'm going to take my roller and roll from one side to the other all the way around, nice even motion, because I want to keep that shape as pristine as possible. And have a look down and see whether I can see any problems with it. It looks okay at the moment. So take your lid, as before, a little bit of liquid clay, just enough to make it tacky, not slippy. Now we should be able to slide our blade underneath and hopefully lift our piece onto our lid. And because you've rolled it and done all that manipulation on the measuring sheet, it will automatically have become bigger, so there's less of a gap all the way around. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to push and pull, because I want it to as even as I possibly can, have the same amount of gap. So I need to pull it slightly more on this side, it needs to go in more that side, pull it slightly more here, because you'll find your lid, even though you thought it was completely even, probably isn't a perfect hexagon. When you think you've got it relatively even, again, just use the blunt edge of your tissue blade. And you can spend a bit of time doing this. Just get it to the size and shape where you think it looks good. And when you think it's relatively even, bake on your tile, again according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay you are using. So once your piece is out of the oven and it's cool enough to work on, all we're going to do is we're going to put a layer of clay all over the bottom, this same colour, and then a little layer of clay all the way around the edge, and that will just give it a slight border, top and bottom. However, you don't have to do that, you can just leave it exactly as it is if you're happy with it as it is. But if you do want to do a border, as per always, the first thing to do, a little bit of liquid clay or PVA glue on the bottom. And then with the excess clay I had left over from doing the design and the scrap, I put it through on a medium thin setting, so setting number 4 on my machine. And obviously I've got a piece here that's wider than I need, so I'm just going to spread it over, making sure I've got no air trapped whatsoever, all the way over my piece. Take it slightly down around the edges, because I want it to join onto the bottom of the patterned clay. And then either with a tissue blade or I'm going to use my craft knife, you should be able to just gently shear away. Again, I'm not worried about making it perfect to start with, I'm just going to take off some of the excess. Once you've got rid of most of the excess, then go back and you should be able to do a nice straight line. When you're happy, just set that down flat on your tile for baking. I'm going to take the excess clay that I've got, put it back through the pasta machine on setting number 4, and I'm looking for pieces where I can cut pieces off that are going to be the right size to go over each of the sides of my hexagon. So lying it flat, taking my tissue blade, I'm just going to chop strips wider than I actually need, 6 of them. As before, a little bit of liquid clay, just on that top edge. Now I'm not going to move this now because it's sat nicely on the tile with that bottom clay in place. If you're at all worried about doing both the top and bottom at the same time, you can always bake the bottom bit first and then add this extra layer around the top if you wish. And then I'm just going to take my pieces, press them on where I get to the corner, cut at a slight angle, lay the next piece on where I get to a corner, cut at the angle, where you get the overlap, cut at the angle, and repeat going all the way around. Where the joins are, with your knitting needle, just neaten over to create a seamless piece. Just give it a little bit of a roll over with your roller, just to make sure they're nicely all joined together. And then, as we did before, just going to pull that down and over so we can see where we need to cut. And then with the craft knife or tissue blade, whichever you feel more comfortable with, I'm just going to cut down and take off the excess clay, both in the inside and on the out. So as you saw there, I just took the excess off with the craft knife, and now to finish off with a nice clean wet wipe, I'm going to very gently run over both sides just to smooth off and round off the edges. And once you're happy with how it looks, then again just bake that as per the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay you are using. But I just think it just adds a little something to having the top and the bottom with that little border of the dark colour. Okay, so the lid's now finished baking and we're ready to put our outside bit on and finish this off. However, of course, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. You can leave it exactly as it is. So what you need to do is you need to get a little bit of your last bit of clay that's left, and you need to put it through the pasta machine until you get it to a thickness that is roughly the same thickness as the bits of clay you were using. I did a bit of experimenting, and for me it was setting number 1 on my pasta machine. That's the one that fitted most of my sides anyway. So as you can see, I've chopped off one end nice and neat. I'll just redo that now, so just taking it away, and I'm going to chop off 6 slices, again slightly wider than I need. And as before, we're going to take a little bit of the liquid clay and once that's done, just take a piece, press it up. With my thumb, I'm actually pressing it flat against the piece and going out in a straight line. Remove a bit of the clay, pull off or cut off the excess. Same thing, going straight out, and chop off the excess, and then just carry on doing that all the way around the outside. So once you've got all the pieces on roughly, you're going to go over and join them together neatly where all the joins are. And then I'm just going to roll it flat all the way around the outside with my knitting needle. Just making sure that that clay is nicely adhered. So what I can now do, or should be able to do, is going away from me with either the tissue blade or the craft knife and just chop away level with the sides of our lid. Again, you can either leave it like that, or for the final piece I'm going to add an extra layer of clay all the way around the outside just to give it an extra finish. So I'm going to pick all my pieces up. This is going to be a very thin layer just to neaten it all up. And again, you could do this in 2 bakings, so you could bake this as it is now and then add the extra layer around the outside later if you wanted to, but I'm going to do it all in one. So take all your bits of clay, put it back through the pasta machine on a nice thin setting. So I'm putting it through on setting number 5, but to make life easy for myself, I'm going to get a piece hopefully that's wide enough or long enough to go all the way around the outside. So I fold it into quite a narrow strip and I'll put it back through the pasta machine that way down so that all the folds are at the side, so any air trapped in the folds will move completely up the piece. So now I definitely have a piece long enough to go all the way around. So I'll chop one bit straight, just give myself a bit of excess. And then as before, just a small amount of wet liquid clay, just mainly onto the bottom edge of this one. And then I'll start on a corner and then just fold it all the way around. And it just gives the lid a very nice, neat edge. When you get up to the starting point, just cut off the excess. Going to go and press it down slightly more so I can see it's adhered all the way round, neaten off the join, and then as we did before, probably coming towards me this time because obviously we've got the bottom of the lid here, just take off the excess. My fingers I'm holding onto the baked clay here. So I'm not touching the unbaked border we put on the top. So that chops off quite nicely. And then you should be able to do the same at the top. And I will normally, with a wet wipe, a nice clean wet wipe, nice and flat, just give it a slight rub, just to smooth off any of those corners. And when you are happy, just put the piece back onto your tile, and as always, tent in foil and bake according to the manufacturer's baking instructions for the brand of clay you are using. And that's it, that's your piece done. By the time this is baked, the only thing left to do and to decide is whether or not you want to sand and polish, or whether you're happy with it as it is. So here we are, here is our finished piece out of the oven. Now I have sanded and polished this, and I've sanded it with the wet dry sandpaper, and I started with 240 grit, then 600, 1000, 1500, and then finished at 2000. And please do remember, whenever you use wet dry sandpaper, put a little bit of detergent or wash up liquid in the bowl to help collect all the particles of the polymer clay that's sanded. And also, very important, please do remember to wear some form of hand protection like rubber gloves or something like that. So as I say, there we go. I've sanded this to it's very nice and smooth. I then gave it a very soft burnish just with a soft polishing cloth, and then I've finished this with a layer of Renaissance wax, which is this stuff which I just rubbed on, let dry, and then again with the polishing cloth just rubbed it to a soft sheen. So that's the box. Really nice little box there, and don't forget, of course, with the method we used for making the hexagon, you can make these boxes any size. But do be aware of, the bigger they go, the thicker the card needs to be with the inserts and our triangles in order to keep it firm on the inside when baking. I hope you enjoyed that one. Thank you so much for those of you who've subscribed, I really do appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you next time. I think that's it for now. Bye.